I moved in with my best friend to hide from my stalker, but the nightmare didn't end. He entered my life under a new guise, and when the police searched his garage, they found more than just my things. Hello, everyone. For many years, I've been reading stories on this subreddit, but I never thought I would write my own. More than 10 years have passed. I have my own family, children. I live in a different country, but to this day, when I'm home alone in the evening, I think I see a shadow flicker outside the window, and the creak of a floorboard makes my heart beat wildly. This story changed me forever, and today I am ready to share it. It's long, very detailed, and very personal. I want to tell everything as it happened, down to the last horrifying detail. Part 1. The Night Visitor. It all started the summer after I graduated from high school. I was 18 and still living with my parents in the suburbs. It was a hot, stuffy summer, and the nights brought no relief. One night, I was up late packing for an upcoming camping trip with friends. It was around 2 in the morning. The house was silent, broken only by the steady ticking of the hallway clock. Because of the heat, I had opened the window in my room on the second floor, leaving only the flimsy mosquito screen. I was sitting on the floor, rolling up my sleeping bag, when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I slowly turned my head and froze. Through the window frame, in the gap between the frame and the screen, a hand was inserted. Not just a hand, but a hand in a black glove. Long, thin fingers were slowly, almost tenderly, moving across the screen, trying to feel for the latch. I stopped breathing. I couldn't move, watching this surreal act. Then I found the strength and screamed, not just a yelp, but a full-blown, top-of-my-lungs scream. The hand jerked as if stung and disappeared into the darkness. I ran to the window and saw him. He was standing in our bushes, just a few meters from the house, a tall, thin man, dressed all in black. His face was hidden in the shadow of a hood, but I felt him looking directly at me. We stood like that for maybe a second, maybe a minute time, lost all meaning. Then he turned around and silently melted into the night. Rushing to my brother's room, we called the police. 2 officers came, searched the yard with flashlights. Nothing. They said the standard phrases, lock your windows, install motion sensors, be vigilant. They left, and a heavy silence hung in the house. But my mother, whose maternal instinct had apparently kicked into high gear, said, "He will be back." And she was right. She took my dad's baseball, we couldn't find a bat, and went out onto the back porch. I watched her from the kitchen window, my heart pounding out of my chest. About 20 minutes later, she gestured for me to come. I approached. "Look," she whispered, pointing to the tree line at the end of our property, and I saw him again. He was moving from tree to tree, crouching low to the ground like a predator. His movements were smooth, calculated. He wasn't running, he was stalking, methodically closing the distance to my window. My mom couldn't take it anymore and yelled, "Get the hell out of here, you bastard!" He froze for an instant, then burst into a sprint with inhuman speed, jumped over the low fence, and vanished. After that incident, I didn't just stop opening that window. I nailed it shut and covered it with thick curtains that I never opened again. We installed motion-activated floodlights. For a while, things were quiet. I tried to convince myself it was just a local creep who had found a new victim. Part 2. The First Apartment and the Escalating Nightmare. About 6 months later, I rented my first apartment in the city center with my best friend. It was an old 3-story building with creaky floors, but for us, it represented the peak of freedom and adulthood. The only downside was the street parking. I had to park my car wherever I could find a spot. Then it started. First, I simply found the driver's side window smashed. The shards were neatly swept onto the seat. Neither the stereo nor the GPS was stolen. On the passenger seat lay a single rose, a long stem, a dark burgundy, almost black bud. I thought it was someone's sick joke, threw the flower away, and went to a repair shop to replace the glass. But it happened again. The next week, another smashed window, another rose. Then, once a week, like clockwork, I changed parking spots, tried to park under streetlights, but he always found my car. The gifts changed. Once it was a pair of men's underwear, cheap from a supermarket. Another time, a bag of Tootsie Rolls, my favorite childhood candy. That's what broke me. It meant he wasn't just a random maniac. He knew me. He had been watching long enough to learn such small details. One day, I went to the laundry room in the basement of our building. I took my clothes out of the dryer and started folding them, and I realized that all my bras and panties were gone. Only mine were missing. My roommate's things were untouched. I ran to the landlady, who just shrugged. Another time, a friend from college came over. We were sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, chatting about nonsense. After he left, about half an hour later, he called me. All 4 tires on his car had been neatly slashed, with a sharp object along the sidewall. A new set of tires cost him a pretty penny. I was terribly ashamed and scared. The climax was a letter. It was waiting for me in the mailbox. The envelope had no return address, and inside was a sheet of paper covered in small, neat handwriting. He wrote about his love. Not a youthful crush, but something sick, obsessive. He knew the color of the curtains in my old room at my parents' house. He knew I liked to wear a green sweater on Tuesdays to college. He knew how I laughed. He wrote that we were destined to be together. I still have a copy of that letter. I keep it as a reminder. That same day, I started looking for a way to break the lease. I was lucky. Another acquaintance agreed to take it over. In a panic, I packed my things and moved in with another friend, Ashley, on the other side of the town. Part 3. The New Sanctuary and the Ghostly Matt. Ashley's apartment was in a new complex with a key-coded entrance and an underground parking garage accessible only with a pass. For the first few months, I breathed easily for the first time in a long while. I started sleeping through the night again, not waking up at every sound. Then Ashley met a guy. On MySpace, his name was Matt. He wrote to her first, they started messaging, and then they met. From the very first day I saw him, I was struck by a cold, unpleasant feeling. Matt was unnaturally handsome, perfect features, a fit body. But his smile? It wasn't a smile, it was a grimace. The corners of his lips turned up, but his eyes remained cold, empty, as if made of glass. He was quiet, and when he did speak, his remarks were pretentious, out of place. He could suddenly start talking about the life cycle of cicadas or the chemical composition of neurotoxins while we were discussing what to order from the pizzeria. My friends and I gently hinted to Ashley that he was strange, but she was blinded. She had never been so popular with men, and here was this Adonis paying attention to her. She thought he was her Prince Charming. Matt started spending more and more time at our place. He would come over, sit on the couch, and could sit silently for hours, staring at one spot, with that frozen smirk on his face. I started staying late at work, going to the movies alone, just to be home less. One day I came home from work earlier than usual. No one was in the apartment except Matt. He was sitting on our couch, a couple of buttons on his shirt undone, drinking my beer from the fridge. "Ashley got called in for overtime," he said without turning his head. "She said I could wait." I nodded and went to the kitchen. Rage was boiling inside me. I grabbed a can of soda and a pack of cookies and headed to my room, slamming the door. About 40 minutes later, there was a knock. "Hey, wanna watch some TV?" His voice was quiet but insistent. We should get to know each other better. We both love Ashley. Reluctantly, I agreed. I thought maybe I was just being biased. We sat down to watch some action movie. I stared at the screen, trying not to look at him, but at some point, I couldn't stand it and glanced in his direction. He wasn't watching the TV, he was watching me, intently, without blinking. His smirk grew wider. "What?" I blurted out, unable to contain my irritation and fear. "I just can't believe it," he said in the same flat, emotionless tone. "Believe what?" He didn't answer. He just slowly shifted his gaze back to the screen and continued watching the movie, still smirking. Every hair on my body stood on end. I muttered something about having to get up early and retreated to my room, clicking the lock shut. Part 4. The Exposure. After that incident, I practically stopped being home. I slept over at friends' places, at my parents'. I started looking for moving options again, even though I really didn't want to. One day, coming home from work, I saw a huge bouquet of roses on the living room table. Next to it lay an open greeting card. I was about to walk past it, snorting skeptically, but something stopped me. Curiosity? A premonition? I walked over and picked up the card, and immediately dropped it as if it were a red-hot iron. My heart began to race, escalating into a panicked gallop. I recognized that handwriting. That unique, precise, compact handwriting. The handwriting of my stalker. Holding my breath, I ran to my desk, where I kept those original letters in a sealed envelope. I took them out and placed them next to the card. There was no doubt. It was the same person. Matt, my nightmare, my pursuer, had moved into my home, slept in the next room, eaten at my table. My first impulse was to grab a knife and run to his room, but I got a hold of myself. I called the police. My voice was breaking. I could barely string words together. While I waited for the operators, I called Ashley. "You need to come home right now," I said, trying to speak as calmly as possible. "What's wrong?" "I'm at work." "Just come home. It's very important." The police arrived quickly. 2 detectives, a man and a woman. Stammering and crying, I told them everything. I showed them the letters. I showed them the card. The female detective carefully compared the handwritings, and her face became serious. They asked about Matt. I said he was probably with Ashley at work. The detectives left immediately to speak with her. As I later found out, they took Ashley to the station to give a statement. There, under the weight of the facts, they laid out the whole truth for her. Ashley, in a state of shock and rage, violating a direct order from the detectives, called Matt and screamed at him, calling him a psycho and a maniac. No one ever saw him again. He evaporated. He wasn't at the job he had listed. The address he had given Ashley, he said he was living with friends, turned out to be fake. There were no relatives, no friends. He was a ghost who had materialized only to infiltrate my life. Part 5. The Trophies and the Abyss. Ashley and I, trembling with disgust and fear, decided to look through the things he had left in her room. There was clothing, a few books he had apparently never opened, and a black sports bag. We unzipped it. On top was a tracksuit, but underneath was my personal hell. We dumped the contents onto the floor, and this is what we saw. A stack of photographs. Dozens of them. Me in the college parking lot, me at the supermarket, me walking down the street. All the shots were taken with a hidden camera from a distance, but one was different. It showed me sleeping in my own bed, in this very apartment. The shot was close up, clear. It had been taken here, while I was asleep, and I hadn't even woken up. 2 pairs of my panties that had gone missing from the laundry room in my old apartment. Where were the rest? I was afraid to think. An empty cardboard Starbucks cup with a smudge of my red lipstick on the edge of the lid. A gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant that my grandmother had given me. I thought I'd lost it at the gym. Clippings from the local newspaper with listings for apartments in our area, with marks next to our address. We had seen enough. We called the police and handed over this collection. It seemed like the end, but the worst was yet to come. A few days later, the lead detective on the case called me. His voice was tense. While checking Matt against databases, they had come across 2 old, unsolved missing persons cases for girls in our state. Both had disappeared 2 years and 1 year before my story. The trails had gone cold. After obtaining a warrant, they searched a garage he had rented under a fake name in a neighboring town. What they found there would have made even seasoned forensics experts shudder. It wasn't just a storage unit for trophies. It was an altar to his sick mind. In the garage, inside a metal locker, they found another album. It contained photos of those two missing girls. The pictures were taken secretly, like mine. They were smiling, unaware they were being watched. Their personal belongings were there, one girl's student ID, the other's denim jacket. But the most terrifying, the most inhuman trophy was what lay in a small plastic tube, neatly labeled with one of the missing girl's initials. Inside, on a cotton ball, was a broken-off human fingernail, with a dried, blackened piece of cuticle. Matt wasn't just a stalker. He was an abductor, and, most likely, a murderer. And he had been sitting on my couch, watching movies with me, while in his garage were the pieces of evidence that two other girls who had crossed his path had disappeared forever. Epilogue. I didn't wait for him to decide I should be the next exhibit in his collection. I took a job offer I had been considering for a while and moved abroad. I didn't just move to another city, I changed continents. Ashley never recovered from the shock. Our friendship didn't survive it. She blamed herself, and I, although I understood she was also a victim, deep down couldn't forgive her for her blindness, her unwillingness to hear me. The police never found Matt. Those two girls were never found either. Their cases are still in the archives, marked unsolved. I got married, had children. I have a good life, but a part of me forever remained in that room where I was looking at the card with the familiar handwriting. I still don't have social media under my real name. I still, when I go to a cafe, sit with my back to the wall so I can see the entrance. Every unfamiliar man who looks at me for too long triggers a panic attack in me. He is out there somewhere, and he's not just a stalker. He is a monster, walking free, and I know that somewhere there are other girls who might be receiving bouquets of dark burgundy roses right now. So, Matt, let's never meet again, but if our paths ever cross again, this time I'll be ready. Story 2. Hello everyone, I'm writing here because I can't keep this to myself any longer. I need an outside perspective, or maybe I just need to vent into an anonymous space. I'm a police officer in a small town called Old Creek, Vermont. Imagine a place where everyone knows each other, where the main event of the week is a high school football game, and on the main street, there's one traffic light that blinks yellow after 8 p.m. I was born and raised here. After serving in the Army, I came back here, thinking I'd be catching drunk drivers and breaking up neighbors' arguments over fences. How wrong I was. My name is Miles. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 6 months, my life has turned into a waking nightmare that haunts me even in the rare hours of sleep. It all started last October. The first victim was Mrs. Eleanor Graves, 78 years old, a widow, a former librarian. She was found in her well-kept house on Aspen Street. No signs of a break-in, no signs of a struggle. The autopsy showed cardiac arrest. Her death was attributed to old age. Everyone thought so, except for our old sergeant, Hank Morris. He sensed something, but couldn't prove anything. Then came Benjamin Crawford, the owner of an antique store. Again, no traces. Again, a natural death in his armchair by the fireplace. But Hank noticed one detail that wasn't included in the official report. Both times, a day or two before the death, an employee from the Old Creek Energy Utility Company had visited the victims to check the meters. There were no records of these visits in the company's database. We became worried, but we had zero evidence. No fingerprints, no foreign DNA. This guy was a ghost. We nicknamed him the caretaker. He would come, do his work, and someone would die. Perfectly, cleanly, silently. Everything changed on the cold night of November 12th. The victim was Tommy Shaw, 42 years old, a car mechanic, healthy as an ox. Our patrol unit found him in his garage. But this time, everything was different. The garage door was ajar, tools were overturned on the floor. Tommy was unconscious, with a barely detectable pulse. A broken lamp lay nearby. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition. He fell into a coma. The doctors said he had almost no chance, but he was breathing, and that was our first ray of light. We searched the garage. Nothing, not a single clue. This man was as clean as a sterile room. The only thing we could do was wait by Tommy's bedside. I was on duty outside his room, watching that large body, once full of life, now entangled with wires and tubes. The ventilator hissed rhythmically, replacing his lungs. We all understood. Tommy was our living evidence, our only hope. He was put on life support not so much for a chance of survival, but to preserve the last witness of the caretaker. A month passed. December. The town was preparing for Christmas, but for us, holidays didn't exist. Pressure from the mayor and the public grew. Could we tell people nothing? That an invisible killer was walking their streets? That would cause panic. And then, on December 17th, a miracle happened. Tommy woke up. I was there when he opened his eyes. He was confused, panicked, but he was alive. After a few days of recovery, when he could speak more or less coherently, Hank and I questioned him. It was agonizing. He remembered in fragments. It was evening, dark. I was tinkering in the garage with a carburetor. His voice was a hoarse whisper. There was a knock. He said he was from Energy, to check the wiring. I let him in. Tommy fell silent, his eyes darting around the room as if reliving the moment. He was, ordinary. Average height, blue jacket with a logo, a cap. Didn't see his face, showed a badge, just a glimpse. Then, he was doing something at the electrical panel, and I turned my back to him to get a soldering iron. And then, a blow in the back. A sharp pain, like an electric shock, but stronger. I tried to turn around, caught on something, fell. Everything went dark. A blow? With what? Hank asked, trying to stay calm. Don't know. Like a needle. A very big needle. He didn't remember anything else, but that was everything. The only description we could get. The caretaker was real, and he used a utility worker's ID as a pass into his victims' homes. We doubled, then tripled our efforts. We checked all former and current employees of Old Creek Energy, all contractors. Nothing, no matches. This man was a chameleon who could perfectly blend into the system and disappear. The lull lasted 3 weeks. We had started to hope that he was gone, that he got scared. Maybe he left town. We were wrong. A new attempt happened last night. The victim was Clara Jensen, a young woman who had recently moved to Old Creek and worked remotely as an IT specialist. She lived on the outskirts in one of those new townhouses. He chose her because she was a stranger. She had no connections here. Standard predator tactics. But Clara turned out to be not the timid type. She had a panic button connected to our station, and she managed to press it. We rushed to the alarm robbery signal. Cars without sirens, but at high speed. When we broke in, the scene was horrifying. The hallway was overturned. A vase was broken, a floor lamp knocked over, a vivid trace of a desperate struggle. Clara lay unconscious on the floor in the living room with the same symptom, sudden cardiac arrest, but the medics on site managed to restart her heart. She's now in intensive care. The doctors are fighting for her life, and here it is, the lead, the one we had been praying for all these months. On the doorknob, on the inside, a small piece of fabric, no bigger than a palm, was snagged. Dense, plaid shirt fabric, red and black plaid, and on it, several dark, almost black fibers. And most importantly, on the fabric were microscopic traces of some chemical compound. Preliminary analysis showed something organic, complex. He was in a hurry. She resisted. She fought for her life so fiercely that she tore a piece of his clothing from him. For the first time, the caretaker left behind physical evidence. Not just a ghostly trace, but a part of himself. It's 4:23 a.m. now. I'm writing this from the duty room. The lab in Burlington is working on the fabric. Clara is still unconscious. Tommy is under 24/7 guard. Hank is sleeping in his office, sprawled in his chair. I don't know who he is, but I know he's no longer a ghost. He is a man who wears plaid shirts, a man who made a mistake, and we will find him. For the first time in all this, I feel not just fear and despair, I feel rage. He entered our town, our homes, and he thought he was untouchable. Now the game has changed, and we are on his trail. The next 2 days were the longest and most intense of my life. I barely slept, lived on coffee and cold pizza from the vending machine. But now I can tell you something. We've made progress. First, the bad news. Clara Jensen, that brave girl, never regained consciousness. The doctors fought until the end, but last night her heart stopped for good. She didn't survive. The guilt is eating me up incredibly. We were so close, but now she has become another ghost on his conscience. And that gives us even more determination. But now for what changed everything. The lab in Burlington did a brilliant job. The chemical compound on the scrap of fabric isn't just organic matter. It's a highly specialized drug, a cocktail of a plant-based neurotoxin and a powerful muscle relaxant, a substance that causes almost instantaneous paralysis of the diaphragm and cardiac arrest, masking it as a natural heart attack. To administer it, you wouldn't need a syringe, but something like a high-pressure injector, similar to what veterinarians use to sedate large animals. This explained the blow of a big needle that Tommy felt. But the most important thing, the fibers. They weren't just hairs. They were fibers from a wig, dark, almost black, but with microscopic traces of a bleaching agent at the base. Our caretaker was changing his appearance, and under that wig, there were most likely light-colored hair. And then Hank, our old sergeant, remembered something. After the first case, Mrs. Graves, he was questioning the neighbors. One old lady, Mrs. Potter, mentioned in passing that she had seen a young guy from the TV people near the house. She said he was too clean for a handyman. At the time, no one paid it any mind. So what? A TV guy. But now that phrase sounded different. We pulled all the service requests for the past year from the cable companies that worked in Old Creek. There were only 2, and in one of them, Vermont Cable Vision, we hit the jackpot. 3 names. 3 employees who had serviced the neighborhoods where the murders occurred on the approximate dates preceding them. 2 of them were checked and had ironclad alibis, and the third, his name was Thomas Finch. Thomas Finch, 28 years old, started as an intern at Old Creek Energy 5 years ago, then quit and moved to the cable company. His personal file had several complaints from clients about excessive intrusiveness and strange questions about personal life. He was quiet, inconspicuous. Colleagues described him as a loner who always wore plain clothes, often solid-colored sweaters or t-shirts, no plaid shirts. But when we got a warrant to search his apartment on the outskirts of Burlington, it was like entering his lair. The apartment was sterilely clean, not a speck of dust, but in the closet, in the far corner, on the very top shelf, lay a neatly folded red and black plaid shirt. On the sleeve, there was a fresh, neatly sewn-up tear, matching the thread. The shape and size perfectly matched our scrap. In the bedroom, in a hidden drawer under the bed, we found his work kit. Fake IDs for Old Creek Energy, Vermont Cable Vision, and a couple of other companies, all of the highest quality. A legendary ring with a cavity for poison? No, but a homemade injector disguised as a multimeter, and vials of that very toxin and wigs, and a diary. God, that diary. He had been keeping it since his first practice, as he called it. It wasn't a madman's manifesto. It was a cold, methodical report of an engineer testing a system. He was studying vulnerabilities, not of people, but of the security system of a small town. His goal wasn't death, but perfection, the perfect crime. He chose victims not for personal motives, but by criteria: elderly, lonely, those whose death wouldn't raise too many questions. He was a gardener, thinning the garden at his discretion. Mrs. Graves was his first successful experiment. Benjamin Crawford, a demonstration of the method's repeatability. Tommy Shaw, with Tommy, he made a mistake. Subject number 3 exhibited unexpected physiological resilience, leading to an unplanned complication. And he chose Clara Jensen because she was a new element in the system, whose disappearance was meant to test the network's reaction to an off-script stimulus. There wasn't a drop of emotion in his notes, only data. He wasn't a monster, he was a machine, and that was the most frightening thing. Thomas Finch had disappeared. He hadn't shown up for work for 2 days. His phone was found thrown in the river. Surveillance cameras at the Burlington bus station captured a man in a dark hoodie and a cap boarding a bus to Boston. It was him. We're sure of it. But now we have his DNA from the wig comb we found. We have his photographs. We have his name. The FBI has joined the manhunt. It's no longer just 2 exhausted cops from Old Creek hunting, but the entire Department of Justice machine. I'm sitting in front of the monitor now, and my hands are shaking. From fatigue, from anger, from relief. We haven't caught him. Not yet. But we've torn off his mask. We've pulled him out of the shadows and given him a name. He is no longer the caretaker. He is Thomas Finch, a 28-year-old fugitive wanted for 4 murders. Old Creek has fallen silent in shock. The streetlights now stay on all night. People look at each other with suspicion. Our small, naive world has cracked. We won't fix it, but we can make sure that the one who broke it answers for it. I don't know where he is, but I know we will find him, because in his quest for perfection, he made the simplest and most human mistake. He underestimated those he considered just part of the system. He underestimated old Hank with his intuition. He underestimated Tommy with his stubborn health. He underestimated Clara with her panic button. And he underestimated us. The hunt is just beginning. And this time, the ghost is him. 3 weeks passed. Silence. Thomas Finch had vanished, as if he had dissolved into thin air. Bus stations, cameras, reports from colleagues in other states. Nothing. He was as good at fleeing as he was at killing. This silence was more oppressive than any tense chase. We knew he was out there somewhere, and we knew that his thirst for perfection hadn't gone away. And then Hank, who seemed to have learned to read this guy's mind, proposed a crazy idea. He's an engineer, Hank said, frowning. He can't help himself. He needs to improve the system. He's watching. We set a trap for him. Not a physical one, but a digital one. With the help of a contact in cybercrime, we subtly planted a disguised leak on a few closed, notoriously anonymous forums. A fake internal FBI memo in which an expert contemptuously analyzed the methods of the so-called caretaker, calling his scheme amateurish and full of flaws, and him, a dilettante who just got lucky in the backwoods. We pointed out non-existent mistakes he hadn't made and mocked his beloved injector, calling it primitive. We were challenging him, contesting his perfection. For a man whose identity was built on that, this was worse than just a wanted poster, and he took the bait. At first, strange, technically savvy posts appeared on the forums in defense of the caretaker's methodology. An anonymous user with a disposable account argued that the FBI expert was incompetent. He quoted medical journals on toxicology and forensic materials. He was too smart to reveal himself directly, but his professional pride, his obsession, wouldn't let him stand aside. Our guys in the cybercrime division began the complex work of tracking. He used chains of proxy servers, public Wi-Fi, but every time he accessed the network, he left a microscopic digital trace. He was cautious, but he was angry, and anger is always a mistake. Last night, he made a fatal mistake. To prove his intellectual superiority, he uploaded an encrypted file to the forum, the improved schematic of his injector, as he wrote, to enlighten those idiots at the FBI. It was his masterpiece, his final word. Decrypting the file took several hours, and there, in the metadata of the blueprint he had created in a specialized engineering program, we found coordinates, geo-coordinates of the location from which he had last saved that file, an abandoned printing house on the outskirts of Albany, New York. The raid was swift and quiet. We, me, Hank, and an FBI SWAT team went in at dawn. Inside, it smelled of dust, old paper, and ozone. He was sitting at a table cluttered with laptops, schematics, and soldering equipment. He was pale, thin, wearing that same red and black plaid shirt, now with a new patch on the sleeve. He didn't resist. When I put the handcuffs on him, his hands were cold and completely dry. He looked up at me, and in his eyes there was no fear, no hatred. There was only a cold, indifferent curiosity, like a scientist observing a failed experiment. "You used social engineering," he said quietly. "Not bad, but your bait was too obvious. I knew it was a trap." "Then why?" I asked, still not believing it was over. He thought for a second. "I needed to make adjustments to your model. You underestimated my methods. Now the data is corrected." He wasn't concerned that he had been caught. He was concerned about the accuracy of the data. That was the creepiest moment in this whole story. Right now, Thomas Finch is in a holding cell. He is refusing a lawyer and giving statements with the air of someone delivering a lecture. We have his diaries, his equipment, his confessions. The case can be considered closed, but something inside me broke. I look at Old Creek, now asleep, at the lights in the windows, and I don't feel relief. I see not houses, but targets. Not people, but vulnerabilities in the system. Thomas Finch didn't just kill 4 people. He infected all of us with his cold, mechanistic view of the world. Hank is retiring next week. He says he's tired, and I'm staying. But now, when the yellow light of our only traffic light blinks at night, I feel like I see in its rhythm not the cozy pulse of my hometown, but the soulless error code of a perfect, sterile system. And somewhere deep down, I understand that a small part of the caretaker has remained here, with me.